Well, Andrew and Dick, great way to end this discussion thus far. Thank you very much. I'm going to throw to Kate Lundy, if I may, first. We can get a mic to Kate. What do you make of all this?
Look, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Can I congratulate Manufacturing Australia on the initiative? One thing about public policy is you can't make good policy without good information, and the opportunity to sit down with CEOs directly and hear, as Dick Warburton said, direct examples of the challenges they face is exactly what we need to hear. The compounding effect of state, federal regulations across a whole series of portfolios. This is the challenge of modern government. You've said, Andrew, it's the same challenge that they're facing in the US, and it's part of the motivation of the federal government to draw together the right kind of forum to get that conversation happening and get a better understanding of the cross-portfolio issues. But in our conversation this morning, I identified no less than about 6 or 8 cabinet ministers that would be involved in addressing the range of issues that were presented, and that I think it sits as a part of what we need to do as a country to clear the way for greater success and ongoing productivity improvements for all of the companies. Dickie, can I make the general comment that as a government we clearly understand the role that manufacturing plays in our economy. It's why we've lifted the profile and prevalence and status of our industry minister to include manufacturing into cabinet. My role as Minister assisting Greg Combet on these issues is to make sure that those lines of communication are open and working with him directly to carry those messages in a cross-portfolio way back to where they need to be heard and will be acted upon. So it's a changing characteristic of the way we do government to be able to respond to the challenges. I won't go through each of the issues that have been raised. I know that's not why you asked me to speak, but I can assure you it's been a truly excellent morning, and it's the way I like to work, having that direct relationship and examples of companies confronting specific challenges and then being able to respond in an effective policy way. So from my point of view, it's been an excellent way to spend my morning, and Stephen Jones is here with me, and Craig Emerson, our Trade Minister, was part of the discussion this morning too. So that was a great chance for him to get his head around the anti-dumping points that Capral and others were making. Thank you.
Kate, thank you. I'll hand that mic across to Sophie, perhaps, as Shadow Industry.
Yeah, I've been busting to have my say all morning. Look, this is not new stuff, either for the opposition or for the government. I've been the Shadow Minister now for over 2 years. We've been hearing the same stuff. So I think, first and foremost, those politicians who haven't known about this, maybe Manufacturing Australia and your fellow travellers need to put the hard word and start educating some politicians. That's the first point. There were some really significant broader arguments made, and the first one was that governments should do no harm. There is a hell of a lot that we can do to make it easier for Australian manufacturers, for Australian business to operate in Australia. And with our deregulation task force, with Arthur Sinodinos and 2 deputy chairs, that will be a very important part in our approach to creating the right environment for manufacturers and for other business. Because it kills me when I hear of the practical stories, because I hear them time and time again. I was out there in the last couple of days visiting manufacturers on the ground, and it's actually a great privilege to be here with people who make the hard decisions to invest, to innovate, to employ people. So that's one thing that is very important to us. The second point that was made was very kindly from BlueScope that there's great common political intent to do the right thing, but there's bureaucratic interests get in the way. I think we need to be a bit more sharp in our comments in that regard. Yes, there may be great political intention, but it's also great political responsibility to ensure that the responsibility of elected ministers actually direct the bureaucracy what to do. It's a sad indictment on democracy that we have life imitating art but 10 times worse, and just think of Yes Minister. And I don't think it's good enough. And I'll go to the example of anti-dumping, because we have had the Coalition has had a very robust response to the anti-dumping issue, because we recognised that there wasn't the firepower in customs, there wasn't really the attitude to really enforce what the law actually was, and there weren't the resources. So looking at the European system, looking at the US system, we have changed our policy, and we did announce it last year, and I just want to briefly give you some of the...
Sophie, I'm going to jump on only because I know it's a political issue with Craig, and that's been up, and we've got to...
Maybe over lunch, because it is important, and we are worlds apart from the government on that. On Fair Work Australia, I share Dick's pessimism, because there are those practical examples of what is happening out there. There is a real change to the culture at the workplace, and when employers say to me, we used to operate as a family, and now we don't, because there's a far more combative relationship, and people are getting... migrant women who don't speak much English are getting bullied into joining the union, and it creates a totally different workplace environment. I think there are real issues, and the government really does need to address them, which we will go to the next election with a very robust industrial relations policy that recognises the realities of what's happening on the ground. So I think that's all you want me to say.
Brilliant, thank you. Greg, with your climate change energy hat on, Greg Hunt.
Okay, thanks very much to Tiggy and to Dick and to everybody. I'll try to give you just two brief practical actions in terms of things that we will change to try to address the concerns raised by the panel. Starting point, of course, is the goal is to change and break the cycle of dependency where government imposes either costs or regulations, and then government has to provide funds. So you have a higher cost base, and then you become dependent on funding, which inevitably, as Matt Sexton from Ream will say, is unreliable. We were on the floor of Matt's Rydalmere plant just a couple of weeks ago, and then I was out at Welshpool in Perth. We met with the workers. They have a sense that a rapid change of funding arrangements has meant that they worry about their jobs, and I know it's very tough. So the two practical areas are these in terms of regulation. The first is simplification. The second is incentives. In terms of simplification, yesterday I visited 4 sand pits near Townsville. 3 have been approved, 2 are operating. In the middle of the 4 is one which is owned by a small family company. They had a state approval. For 5 years now they've been trying to get a federal approval under our Environment Protection Act at federal level. They've been asked to disprove the possible existence of a bat. It's actually called the bare-rumped bat, believe it or not. And they said it would be harder to disprove the existence of aliens. Nobody's seen this bat for 30 years, but they've been asked to provide evidence that the bat doesn't exist in that area so as they could possibly go ahead, even though there are 4 consecutive plots of land, and this is one of the middle plots, and the others are all operating as sandpits. So what does that mean in practice? We are going to radically simplify the Federal Environment Act. That means we're going to create a one-stop shop with the states. That is a single approvals process, a single decision maker, and hard stop, red or green light approval. So that means we're going to aim to have 6 months and deemed approval if the Commonwealth doesn't make a decision in that time, and to have a single approval. That's the sort of thing, Andrew, if you want to bring your plant on board in Australia, what matters, it's if I'm going to make an investment decision, I can get to commercialisation within 3 years rather than 8 years. That is probably the single biggest thing we can do to encourage new investment. Second thing, obviously we're going to obviously in terms of incentives, we will move away from the carbon tax, and we'll try to unify all of the state systems into one single Commonwealth approach. So can be done, radical simplification and an incentives-based approach to emissions.
Super. Thank you. Can I open this to the floor now? Would anybody like to ask all or any of our panel any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Greg Evans from the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Last week we released a survey, the ACCI ACCI Westpac Survey of Industrial Trends, which has been going now for some 50 years, and it looks at the economic circumstances facing the Australian manufacturing industry. Mostly middle-ranking manufacturing businesses, those businesses which are prevalent in the suburbs and and regions of Australia, so probably a little bit different than perhaps some of the representation here today. But overall, the survey showed, and just to give a sense of it, that there's barely a strong indicator, and the typical indicators of profitability and investment and employment are like all very soft. But the other opportunity the survey gives is that we ask about overall confidence levels, and clearly confidence is the major issue at the moment. In particular, they note international and both domestic instability, but also concerns about the direction of interest rates. But the issue that was raised by most as causing major uncertainty is the introduction of the carbon tax and the impact that will have on energy prices. And I should say these are businesses which receive no compensation. They're outside the compensation arrangements, so therefore, and they can't necessarily pass on the impact of higher energy prices to consumers because they're trade exposed, but they're in a weak market position. So I'm just pointing out that middle-ranking businesses, manufacturing businesses, are going to be impacted by the carbon tax, and indeed already impacted with, as one of the speakers mentioned, about with respect to other mitigation policies. Just two closing comments on energy. It seems perverse to us that, in terms of energy policy in Australia, that we're the world's specialist in exporting cheap energy around the world through coal, gas, and uranium. Yet we're imposing costs on our own Australian businesses. That just seems a perverse energy policy. The other closing comment on energy I would make is that we shouldn't discount that baseload energy in Australia will be provided by principally coal into the future, and still represents 80% of our energy. So we believe that's where industrial expansion will be built. We understand that gas has a particular issue with regard to feedstock in some manufacturing sectors, but we shouldn't be so politically correct to discount the contribution that the coal sector can play in terms of cheap energy in Australia.
Greg, thank you for that. I'll take that as a comment or comments. Next question.
I've got a question for Jane.
Please, Kate. Yes.
Okay. In terms of how your company...
I know we had a conversation this morning, so this feels like a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but I think how your company is investing in innovation and changing work processes from the ground up is a really important point to make in the broader landscape of the kinds of challenges facing manufacturing companies and how you're responding.
The first point I'd make is the group that's responsible for productivity is the company. That's part of management's role, and really for us, we've flipped the organisation on our head, and we've actually recognised that the value adders in our business are the people on the shop floor, that are people on the mine bench, and it's our people on the farm gate. And so we've recognised that they're the people who will drive productivity, and what our job is as leaders is to support that value-adding activity, to provide the coaching, the resources and the framework to actually drive that. As a company, we're doing something which is very unusual. We're actually putting $35 million of cost back into the business. We've employed 180 people globally, and we've pulled essentially one person per shift off of the shift so we can train them in the skills that you need on shift to drive productivity in the business.
Terrific. My time is up, but is there a last question around from anybody? Yes, Stephen.
I noticed that in Dick's speech and in the communique, there's a listing of 4 points in a certain order. My impression around the discussion around the panel was that people were passionate about some issues and not others, and I'm wondering if that is a particular ranking, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whether you'd give weight to certain issues over others. So is IR really the main game, or the energy policy and the anti-dumping just as important?
Mr. Warburton's going to take this one.
No, definitely there is no relationship between the order in which they are produced. They're all important issues. This is a rather unique body that's been set up because we don't have a secretariat per se. This is the board. You're looking at it here right now, the CEOs. The working group are the ones who work on the particular issues at the lower levels. But what we'll be focusing on is those companies that have a particular issue in these areas. For example, BlueScope with industrial relations, for example, James with resources, for example, Phil with anti-dumping. They will run the cases as required. So not all of them have got that same issue, but each of these have them individually and we'll run them in that particular fashion. It's a very efficient way of doing it. It just puts a bit more emphasis on the executive chairman to try and pull it all together. That's the big...
I think as you told me, that all of you feel passionately supportive of each other's issues as a group, don't you? Yeah.
That's right. I think the issues are common to all of us, and it was probably really the carbon tax that was a catalyst to bring us together. And as Dick said earlier on, it wasn't any one of those issues is a challenge, but it's the combination of all of them. And just separating them in the way we have is just to try to crystallise all of these issues, but they're all interlinked at the end as well. And if I could just
the way that Manufacturing Australia started was actually all jointly having a big issue with the carbon tax. And that will continue to be an issue going forward to July 1st and beyond. We just mentioned that before, that will be the issue. But we didn't want to focus on that today. We wanted to focus on these four policies. But as I said, there are others. There's Australian standards, there's R&D, there's tax reform. There are other things to look at too. We just can't do everything at once.
I've been given a couple more moments. Anybody got a last question? Yes.
Hi, Edwin O'Young from Port Jackson Partners. Look, I've got a question that's around the energy policy. Some of the comments that James and Andrew made. You made the comment that it seems a travesty that we're linking our domestic gas prices to export international pricing, and highlighted a few policies around the need to protect our gas from the international policies. But Andrew, you also mentioned that in the US there was quite a significant supply response to that in terms of the development in shale gas. And I guess my question is around what's the role of government policies, regulations, streamlining processes and approval processes in order to encourage that sort of a gas development here in Australia, where we talk about having quite a significant resource in shale gas as well, and actually creating a gas glut, if you like.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is not having an energy policy is not an energy policy. So it doesn't exist here, and there's no energy policy. There is no energy policy in the United States either, so feel in good company. So in essence, this is the problem that free market democracies have, is they don't strategically plan. And like if you go to China's 12th five-year plan and read that back cover to cover, you will learn everything you need to know about the exposure this economy has to China. They're going to do things to your economy that you can't imagine. And if we don't get our act together as an economy, and this is the speech I give in the United States as well, you won't be just talking about renminbi and yuan and the value of that. You'll be talking about losing IP and losing entire sectors. So the commodity cycle on not having an energy policy is solved for in America by two very important things that Australia doesn't have. One, America has a large domestic market. Two, America has, over the last 50 years, maybe longer, certainly through the oil boom and gas boom and other minerals, developed an infrastructure. It's aging, but it's all there. You don't. You don't have coast-to-coast infrastructure. You don't have pipelines. You don't have storage. You don't have, because of the lack of a large domestic market, but also the nature of our country. We're urbanized on the southeast corner, and we're very isolated where I was born and raised up in the north. And so these two things that America has enables the supply side to get to market, and the market then establishes the price. And if there's excess supply, the market price goes down. If there's excess demand versus lack of supply, the market price goes up. So the market operates reasonably efficiently. If America allows a lot of its shale gas to be exported, we calculate up to 20%, then the LNG price from China or wherever it is will come back to the domestic price and cripple American industry. That will not happen, as referenced, I think, Dick, your opening remarks. President Obama has understood that. And in fact, despite the massive lobbying by the American equivalent to your industry association here, API in America, the American Petroleum Institute, to enable exports of gas, that simply won't happen. I mean, clearly, therefore, government does play a role. It basically says, I'm going to keep it home to enable my consumer, my transportation fleet, my industry, my job creators to have jobs. That's in essence, an energy policy around gas, if you like. But we don't have an energy policy in full. I would ask the Australian government to look strongly at how to actually put an investment infrastructure around the domestic sector. A reservation scheme is a great start. I think there has to be some spending of precious taxpayer dollar on getting the gas to the local market. I think we've got some pipelines that cross from the middle of the country to the east, but those are not enough to establish the market. And you need to establish the market so James can do what he's talking about. So I think that's the sort of energy policy that needs to be created here. And frankly, we have the same issue in the US, but at least the US has the two things I mentioned.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, I might hand over to make some closing comments, but I certainly have worked myself up into a muck sweat doing this. It's been food for thought for me for many weeks to come. Andrew Liveris, great to have you as a guest. Matt Sexton, James Fazzino, Rob Sindel, Phil Joe, Mike Beardsell, Ian Cummins, Dick Warburton. It's been a great morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Actually, I won't wrap up very long because my father told me that the mind can only take in what the rear end can sit on. So I'm going to be very, very quick on this and just say this is the launch of the various policies of Manufacturing Australia. It's an opportunity for us to present our case clearly, precisely and passionately. And you'll see more and hear more of us as we go forward. But thank you all very much for coming today and listening to these arguments. Thanks, Kate. Thank you very much, and thanks for your comments.